Okay, now we're outside and we're preparing to essentially use fume boards to drive down the bees out of the supers. And these are the fume boards. I buy them from a local supplier. They have sort of a metal black top and a wooden frame, and then this sort of cloth thing on the inside cover. I've already sprayed them with a product that it has a very strong almond taste or almond smell. I don't know if that's natural or artificial, but anyway, it's pleasant to us, but apparently very disagreeable to the bees. So when I put that on top of the super, it's going to drive them down to get away from it, which is what I want, because I want the top few boxes to be as empty as possible. This is step 1 of 2 of getting ready to actually remove the boxes, or getting ready to actually remove the honey. The next thing I do, and this something I always do, is to get my equipment ready. Over here, I have my basic equipment, which is most importantly the smoker. This is a contraption that you put some kindling inside of, and I light it on fire, and then I put the lid on, and that extinguishes the fire but keeps smoke going. And then there's a bellows here that you can shoot the smoke out the top. And we don't exactly know what happens here, but essentially this combination of substance and the smoke from it sort of causes the bees to calm down or disorients them. So it's a protective measure for a beekeeper to allow you to work a little more safely with bees. As you can see, I've got all kinds of equipment on. I've even tucked my pants into my socks. This is all things I've learned over the years after having been stung once too often. So I'm now going to light the smoker, hopefully, and we'll take it from there. Not sure I've ever filmed this before. So the first thing is to light essentially some newspaper to get things going. Let's try to get a nice amount of it lit. Then I put that into the smoker chamber, and then I add in a mixture of dried things from the neighborhood, actually. Pine cones. I'm kind of running low on this now, and the goal is to get a nice amount of smoke going. I really don't have what I need right now in terms of kindling because I was too lazy to look for it. I ran low and I just got distracted this week. And then, unfortunately, yesterday when I was going to go, it was pouring rain. So obviously it has to be dry in order to be useful, but this is going to have to do. You just want something that's going to give you a nice amount of smoke, and there's actually a very nice kind of woodsy fragrance to it, but again, it's not agreeable to the bees. And then these are some of the primary tools that we use in beekeeping. This is called a hive tool. It's kind of like a multi-purpose tool, but mainly it allows you to pry the boxes apart from each other and get the frames out of the boxes. This is a really great thing that I've started using the last few years. It's a frame grabber, and I'll show you how I use this, but essentially I come down on the top of the frame once it's loosened, and these frames with the honey in them can weigh 5 or 6 pounds. It's difficult to be in there with my fingers, even with gloves on. I don't have good dexterity, and I don't want to be squashing bees and getting them all upset. So going down with this frame grabber in the middle, pulling it out slowly turns out to be a terrific, effective, and non aggravating way to interact with bees. And then this is, well, I'm using it as a bee brush, a way to gently kind of literally brush bees off. This may be where the saying comes from, don't brush me off. We actually do brush bees away gently as a means of removing them from somewhere. This actually comes from my days as an engineering student, but it's basically serves a purpose. You want something with even, kind of very soft bristles, and it works perfectly. So these are kind of my three favorite tools. And let me turn the camera around now, and hopefully this will give a reasonably good view of what's happening. Okay. Yeah. And I will head down there. So it's nice to have a place to set your things when you're not using them. First step always for me is just to gently lift up the lid and put a little smoke in there. And I can hear them buzzing, meaning they're agitated by this, which, you know, isn't great, but it's good because it means they're probably getting ready to move out of the way of this. So I do that, and then I close the lid and leave it for a few seconds. I also sometimes go around to the front and smoke the front entrance a bit. Again, the theory being that it calms them, it disorients them, something like that. And I will do the same with the one in back. This one again is weaker, so there's still thousands of bees in each of them, but there are less here, and they're also, I think, a little bit less aggressive somehow. Bee colonies definitely have their own personalities. Some of them are more tame, and others can be quite aggressive. I was back here last weekend doing some music with some friends in the backyard to try to get away from the sun, and we couldn't stay here because within about an hour they started flying at us, and just became too treacherous, so we had to grab all our equipment and instruments and everything and rush to the front yard. That's not something I normally do. I don't normally come back here and spend time in the backyard just doing that. But in that case, it was pretty interesting to see the result. I might give this another little bit of smoke. You can see some of them kind of crawling out. There are also other creatures that move into the hive. Some of them are innocuous and others are really trouble. We have different spiders and things which go in, which I'm not too worried about, but we have something called hive beetle, which is this little black beetle that is about 1/4 the size of a bee. They like to take refuge there and rear their young in the hive. They're not really a problem, but they can, where there's a weak hive, they can actually kind of overrun and take over the hive. So you're supposed to sort of try to manage the beetle population. So now I'm slowly taking the lid off. These are the hive beetles, if it can be seen, crawling around on the lid, inner lid. Supposed to really just kind of squash them with my tool, and it's sort of a thankless job because there's so many of them, so I don't always spend time on that. If you shake them out, they'll just crawl back in. Now I use the hive tool to carefully pry open what's called the inner cover, and in this case it's screened. These are definitely sort of irritated screened inner cover. Basically, it keeps them inside the hive so they don't enter and exit from the top. That's not something you really want. And the outer cover, which is waterproof and windproof, is what protects them. Once again, you don't want the elements or any rain coming down in here. So that's the outer cover is what really does the job, and this sort of keeps them inside. There are full wooden ones, and then there's screened ones like this. I use the screened ones in the summer because I want ventilation. And I also have screening on the bottom, so theoretically cool air can come up from underneath and through the hive and provide them some level of ventilation. Now, as I said earlier, this top box is one that is not ready, and I can see it. It is certainly not ready to be harvested. So what I want to do basically is remove this, and I probably don't even need to get the bees out. What I'll do is just take this and put it off to the side here temporarily. All of this is working against the weather or trying to make sure I get all this done before it starts raining again. And I think it's going to start raining around no later than 1. It's probably 11 now. And I'll need the whole time to get this ready. So here I'm just trying to remove this box to get to the other boxes that are of interest to me today. When you remove a box, you first have to pry it apart from the one below. Bees are excellent at sealing their homes with something called propolis. It's a kind of a gooey thing that they can produce. It comes partially from tree sap, but then they add enzymes to it. And it seals and insulates their hive from the elements, from wind, from other insects. And they start doing that as soon as you put their hive together. So they basically want it to be all glued down. And the beekeeper has to work against that. I usually give the box a push to the side, and I do that because sometimes the frames are sort of glued to each other from one box to the box below. And if I noticed if I try to just directly lift it up, sometimes the frames from the one below it come up, and that's a mess. You don't want that. So to kind of make sure that's not going to happen, I move this back and forth a bit to make sure that there isn't that kind of a connection happening. And then you have to sort of get your hands on each side of it and gently lift it. Doing things deliberately but slowly and gently is very important. So I try to always do that. And I just put that box off to the side. Now you can probably see, if you have a view down here of all these bees on top here. And what you probably can't see is that this is a very nice super. It's filled with honey, and I can also see, just looking into it, that it's capped off, which means they've reduced it to the required water content. It will be consumable. It will be saleable. They're telling me all of that by simply putting the wax capping on it. And a box like this is going to weigh 30 to 35 pounds possibly, so they're a little bit tricky to work with, especially if they're glued down. So what I'm going to do now, without further ado, is just put the smoke or the fume board on, and we'll see what happens here. I've already sprayed it with that substance, and I think we'll see within a few minutes. I can already hear that they don't like it. They're making a lot of noise in there, and we'll see that probably what will happen is you'll start seeing more of them coming out of the bottom, or out of the front door, and they'll probably start climbing up the side, which can be a separate issue too. But I'll put that on and leave that for about 5 minutes. It's not very windy today, but I'm going to put a brick on top of this just to stabilize it. This is also waterproof. If it were to start raining, it would protect them, but it's not as heavy as the other one, so the wind could possibly blow it off. So I've learned to just do that. they're probably already, well, we'll see what happens there. Anyway. I'm going to turn the video off, but I will, in the meantime, be doing this with the other hive, the same thing. And then in a few minutes, we'll turn it back on and see what we have.